Hey everybody, this is James, VP of Marketing and Partnerships. That's Steve, Founder and CTO. High five, Steve. Yeah, awesome. So this is the start of a new series that we're going to be doing. It's what we're calling almost our Founder Series. So it's a lot of companies will go through and just do a million marketing webinars going through like, hey, buy this, or hey, use this partner. Well, we love those, number one, but number two, the other thing that we want to start playing around with is giving you an understanding of really just like where Leap came from. You know, it didn't just emerge overnight. It's not this anomaly that just came from the lake, blah, blah, blah. It's something that has a lot of thought and a lot of really cool history, specifically from this guy. So one of the things we wanted to do is take you through exactly what that history is, from his mouth, not from mine. It'll give you a hell of a lot more of an insight into why this thing really is just so special. So this is going to be part one in our series. We're going to be talking with the man, the myth, and then from there we're going to circle back and we're going to talk about some of the other pieces, namely the owners of New Look Home Design, which is really where Leap was created, or within their walls, that's where it was created. So we'll be talking to not only their president and CEO, we'll really be looking at the two sides of the story. So it's the sales side of that world plus the actual production side. So really seeing how it affected all components, not only just where it came from. So, without further ado, Steve, I think one of the things we want to do to kick this off, obviously we know who you are, but let's just start from the beginning. You know, I think the easiest place to talk about is just where you came from, where you were raised, things like that, and then we'll let the story progress from there.
Yep. So I started my first job. I remember I was in high school. I hated school. I just couldn't wait to get out. I was so bored in school. Mm-hmm. So I started in computers. I was interested in computers.
Okay.
And so I remember I took this course called Computer Information Technology, which was at the time I thought to like learn how to build websites and design software. And what I found out is when I started that course, it was more of entry-level stuff, like stuff that I had already figured out. So I was very bored. I actually got in trouble in that class because I was just so bored.
Like what? Come on, everyone wants a story.
I don't know, like I got in trouble. I brought a fart machine to school one time, and I taped it under a kid's desk, and then the teacher got it. My mom had to come and pick it up from the office. But
nice.
So
idle hands are the devil's playground?
Right.
Nice.
So I started there, and in 11th grade, I remember talking to the counselor, and they said that I could get out of school half day on a work-study program. So I was like, okay, well, how do I do that? And he's like, well, you have to, based on whatever courses you're taking, if you get a job doing one of those, in my case was computers, computer information technologies. If you get a job working for computers, you can, in your second half of your 11th grade year, you can get out half day. Okay. And then your entire 12th grate year, you can get out half day. So I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. Get out of school early and go out and make some money. So I just did, the first thing I could think of computers was my favorite place to shop at the time was Best Buy.
Okay.
So I went and applied. This guy Matt I was hanging out with at the time, he had already started working there, and I'm like, perfect, I'll work at my favorite store doing what I like with computers, and that should fall in line. So I applied there saying, can I work in the computer department? That I need something to do with computers. Mm-hmm. So I applied for a job there, and I remember I kept like calling to get an interview. Finally, they brought me in, and that was my first sales job. So I got an interview at Best Buy, and they brought me in to teach me how to sell computers.
Okay.
So back then, this was, I graduated in 2002, so this is probably like 2000, 2001 timeframe. Okay. So I started working there. That's actually where I met my best friend to this day. He was the best man at my wedding. He was my manager. His name's Josh. He might even be watching. And I met him there. He was my sales manager, and Best Buy had some of the best sales training to this day that I've ever received.
What kind of
So they taught you how to
components did they have?
Yeah, so they taught you how to do, I guess you call it package selling or solution selling. Mm-hmm. So solution selling being, in a sense, we had these says and do's. Okay. So I would ask the customer certain questions, and based on their responses, I would do or say different things back to them. Mm-hmm. And they had basically an entire like system that you followed, and they would bring these. I think I was only making like $7.50 an hour, in high school, just a high school job. Yeah. But I was able to sell computers where people would come in with the advertisement to look for a computer. I remember it was all mail-in rebates back then. Yeah. And they would come in with a computer. It was $3.99 after mail-in rebates, and that included the computer tower, the monitor, and a printer.
Nice. Those big dinosaurs.
Yeah, so they wouldn't make any money on that package. They might even have lost some money on that package. They would make all their money on selling you like the $60 surge protector, the battery backup surge protector.
Okay.
Or they would make money on the ink cartridges. Like the printer don't make any money, probably even loses money. The ink cartridges is where you make all the money at. The paper, the $35 cable. The printer's $99. The cable to hook it up to the computer's $37.
So all the little accessories.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Apple model, all that fun stuff.
So what we would do was create packages. So a customer would come in for $399, and we would sit down and look at the Sunday ad, and we'd say, okay, these are the computers that people are going to be coming in buying, and then we would create packages. So we say, hey, for instead of $399, for $529, you get everything you need: the cable, the printer, the ink, blah blah blah, everything. And the customer's like, okay, well, if that's everything I need, I'll go ahead and buy that. And again, I just followed my Says and do's. There was nothing. I guess it was something special we were doing, but I just I did the same thing every single time. Okay. And that's really where I learned my first sales, anything. I didn't know I was good at it, but I was always the one they put at the best shifts. I always worked, the Black Fridays, and they always put me at the front lines because I just followed the system and always sold at a high level. You told me a story the other day while we were doing our little company outing. That one of the actual corporate members of Best Buy recognized. So I worked in a store in Glen Burnie, Maryland, and our store had went up so much, and it wasn't just because of me. It was just because the way we were training and the way everybody followed the system, and our package selling, that we figured out how to do it, I guess. And I think our store in rinky-dink Glen Burnie, Maryland, was one of the top 10 in the entire country. I mean, you're talking areas with a lot of money, right? Glen Burnie it's not known for a lot of money, but we were ranked in like the top 10 across the country in Best Buy. Okay, so you're doing something right. Yeah, so I remember I'm like 18 years old, I think, and I had like the C-level executives at Best Buy actually flew in and had me do a pitch to them. And I remember I was doing my pitch, my thing I did every single day of selling them all the different things and the package deal, and I had on my clipboard I would carry around, hey, well, that's the $399 package, but you're still going to need this, that, and the other, and here's everything all in one package, and a slight discount, whatever. So I pitched that to them, and I don't know, today, like if you look in Best Buy's ads, some of the things still have package deals, like, hey, this has everything with the package. Yeah. But I'm not taking credit for that, but that's what we did. And so I worked there for a while until after I graduated, so I don't know, about a year and a half, 2 years. And I got really good at doing the sales. I was the best in that store. And just like in any place, there's turnover. And I remember I was working in the computer department. It was a slow day, and my department phone rang, and I picked it up. And it's like, there's this guy Mark on the other line, and he says, "Hey Steve, you don't know me, but I know of you." He's like, "I work at a different place called CompUSA, and doing exactly what you do, and you can come work for me. Just come talk to me. I'll buy you lunch, and you can make a lot more money doing exactly what you do before a different company." And I was like, "Okay, I'll give it a shot. I'm interested in making more money." Yeah. Yep. So then I went and had lunch with him. This was in Columbia, Maryland, which is actually where we're based at now. It's right around the corner. And I went and had lunch with Mark, and he basically just said, "Look, man, right now you're working on an hourly pay. I think at the time I might have been making $10 an hour. Right? I had graduated high school. I was still working there." He says, "Right now you're working on hourly pay. If you're working on commission doing the same thing, you can make a hell of a lot more." And I was like, "All right, let's give it a shot." So I took the job. I quit Best Buy and went to CompUSA, literally doing the exact same thing. And now you would make it there. I learned all the different profit margins and stuff that was in the stuff, because Best Buy, it didn't matter if I sold it with the service plan, right? They don't really focus on that much anymore, but now they do. I mean, back then they did. So the store was always ranked on how many accessories I added to the ticket and how many service plans I sold on the thing. So CompUSA was the same. They made all their money the same way. And I would get commission off of the service plan. Like I would sell you a laptop, and I'd make maybe $5 or $10 off of a $2,000 or $3,000 laptop. But if I sold you the $250 service plan, I'd make $50 or $60 off of the $250 service plan. So note to self. Yeah. So the service plans were ridiculous markup. I mean, they were. I remember I'd seen in cost at CompUSA, I could see cost in the system, and at least what they said was cost, and it was 80-90% margin at least in those service plans. Okay. So I went there, and now CompUSA was my first taste of commission.
Okay.
So that was where I was like, oh my God, you can, like, I mean, I went from making $10 an hour to making like $30-some an hour.
Okay.
Doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So I worked at CompUSA a while, and then they started to go downhill, right? They're out of business now, but they started to go downhill, and I remember they, their circulars, their ads, they started doing every other week. So like you'd come in one week, there's a ton of business and people coming in the store, but then the next week they didn't do any advertising.
Yeah, just crickets.
So nobody came in the store, right? So it was just such an emotional roller coaster. Or my paycheck was a roller coaster. Yeah. Sales in general
leads to emotional roller coasters elsewhere, but all right. So that obviously that got you your first taste into the sales.
Yep, that was my first commission. And then a guy I worked with at Best Buy, I was talking to, he ended up working at Radio Shack. And this was closer to home. So at the time I was driving all the way to Fairfax, Virginia, because I got transferred in CompUSA. And actually my buddy Josh, who I worked with at Best Buy, he was a store manager at the one in Fairfax temporarily. So he asked me to come work for him. I was like, yeah, great. And then things fell apart. Anyway, I found out that you can make a lot of money selling cell phones.
Got it. So you kind of figured out that bounce one to the other, ended up going over to Radio Shack and worked in their phone departments, etc. Plus, I mean, the common thread with all of this is obviously you're still staying in that like tech foray.
Correct.
So with that, obviously a lot happened down the road from there, and I think one of the things that we can start getting into is obviously we've established a pretty strong base for the sales component, but you know the next little bit that you obviously went into was a little bit more of that entrepreneurial endeavor. So from the Best Buy to CompUSA, Radio Shack.
Yep. So I was working at Radio Shack, and I was doing very good there. That was a very easy job, selling cell phones. I had actually always wanted to have my own business, and got a taste of commission. And I don't think I've worked an hourly job since, but So, I always want to, hey, the harder you work, the more money you make. And, that's just the entrepreneurial spirit. So I actually started, it's a long story of how I got into it, but I started an automotive company where we had towing and fixing cars. So we had like a two-base shop, we were fixing cars. Everything was going great on that. And I actually used my sales in that, where I found out, hey, when people break down, a lot of times you can just get them going. We had a contract with AAA, and you would have a flat tire. So instead of towing you, we would go out and change your tire. But instead of just changing your tire, the salesman in me would sell you a tire plug. So I would say out there, hey, I can go ahead and change your tire and put the donut on, and you can spend the next 3 hours at the tire shop while they put your tires on, or I can just put a plug in this thing right now for $20 and just head on your way and forget about it. Same thing with like washer fluid and windshield wipers cleaning. Like I was selling that kind of stuff out in the field to make extra money. So had the towing company, and this is about the time that the economy tanked. It was like
so that like 2007, 2009.
2008, the economy tanked, and it's just all of that work completely dried up. And I found myself in a spot where we were paying out way more money than we were taking in.
So just bleeding.
Yeah, just debt, and just terrible business decisions that were made. We just took on too much debt. Interest rates were too high. Payments were just way too high, and we lost our butts in that thing. And I just found myself at a point where I was like, we're a couple weeks from losing our house. Like what are we going to do next? And this is when, going back to my buddy Josh, he had contacted me. He had started a home improvement company with his father-in-law. His father-in-law installed fences and decks, I think, for his whole life.
Okay.
And Josh, much like me, he would, he had a sales ability, and he said to his father-in-law, hey, I can do the sales part of this fence and deck thing, and you can do the install, and we'll just go start our own business. And that's what they did.
Got it.
So he was out there selling fences and decks. His father-in-law was installing it, and then he, just talked to me. Hey man, why don't you come and sell? He's seen I was like down on my luck.
Yeah. So
not
with
making any money.
That company folding, and I know that was obviously a pretty tough time.
Yeah, it was a very tough time.
Family and
I have a whole mental block in my head where I try and block those years out of my life because it was terrible.
Yeah. But truthfully, they shape you for what you want to do.
Correct.
I learned a ton of really good lessons.
Right. So I did. I learned a ton from that. And looking back on it now, you're like, okay, yeah, I learned a lot from that. But at the time, it was
it's
terrible.
A punch in the nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my buddy Josh, he said, why don't you go, we're in Maryland, we have a thing for home improvements called the Maryland Home Improvement Commission, right? Mm-hmm. So for those who don't know, this is there's a movie actually that was made about it called Tin Men, which is selling siding, and there's this whole commission where they do in-home sales with free estimates. So for me to go out and give free estimates to customers for home improvement projects, I have to go get a license. Okay. So my buddy Josh was like, hey, you can come work for me and you can make a ton of money doing in-home sales, way more than what you were doing selling cell phones, right? And you can dig yourself out of this hole that you're in selling home improvements, but you got to go get your license first. I was like, all right, well, what do I got to do it? He's like, well, here's the book I used. Go use this. It's an open book test. You can don't go down to Annapolis, blah, blah, blah. You got to schedule an appointment. So I remember I looked it up and it cost $60. And that was a lot of money for me to scrape up, to find $60 to go down and take this damn test.
Yeah, shit.
So, yeah. So I scraped up $60 and I went, I scheduled the test and I went down there. I took my book and I remember the book was about 1.5 inches thick. And I went down there and it was timed. I took the test and I failed. And I later found out that the book that he had given me was to get a contractor's license, as if I was the contractor of the business selling home improvements. It had the sales rep part of it, filtered throughout it, so I had enough information to get the sales rep license. But I didn't have enough time, and I didn't study it, right? I didn't go through the whole book, whatever. So I failed the test, and I went back to Josh. I was like, "Look, man, I don't have another $60 to go take it. It's not for me. I would love to do it, maybe later on down the road." But I couldn't let that die. Like I was like, man, if I could make, I remember he told me I can make $100,000 selling home improvements a year, and I was like, man, if I can make $100,000, I remember telling my wife, I was like, it would change our lives. I mean, we could get out of this hole. It could really help us out. And
at that time too, like if you guys didn't know too, Steve's got a couple mini Steves running around. Yeah. So at that time, how many kids did you have?
I had two daughters.
Okay, cool.
Yep. So
one of them's about to drive, so anyone in the Maryland area, beware.
Right, stay off the sidewalks.
Yeah, right. But so at that time, it was your two daughters. So you guys were really just looking for something.
Yep, my wife was working at a doctor's office. That was really our only stable income at this time. So my wife was working at a doctor's office, putting food on the table. We were living, on next week paycheck, let alone paycheck to paycheck. It was we were spending that. Yeah, it was tough.
Yeah.
Him saying I can make that much money doing home improvements, and then I remember
just burned in your head.
Yep, I was trying to find a job. Right, I was trying to find a job. Like I remember, I was online just trying to find a bunch of different places, and this was the time everybody was laying people off.
Yeah,
I couldn't find a job for more than $10 an hour.
Well, and the unemployment rate at that point was actually one of the highest it's been in a long time, especially in that area of Maryland where we were talking about. The economy was actually hit pretty bad.
Yeah. So I remember I applied for this place and actually took a job. It's the only thing I could find where it was delivering appliances for, like if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's or even Best Buy and you order a dryer, a washer and dryer, they use a third-party company come and deliver it. And it's the same third-party company no matter who you buy it from.
Okay.
So I was going to go work for them, and I remember it was $10 an hour plus tips. I was like, okay, well that is at least something, some stable income, because I wasn't getting any money anywhere else. Then I was doing side jobs for like just people I knew in the industry, with the automotive industry, fixing cars, changing oil, just putting alternators on batteries, whatever I could to put food on the table. So then I remember my wife had said, why don't you go back into sales? That's what you were good at. Just go back and start selling something. And I was like, okay, well, let me look online, because Josh said there's, you can make a lot of money doing this home improvement thing. Let me see what it's all about. And I went back to that. I remember I went online and I was looking different job postings in home improvement, and this is where I stumbled across New Look. They actually have two ways. One was on monster.com, job posting site, and then I remember I was on Craigslist, and so I seen the same job posting on Craigslist, so I applied for it. Ding! Yep. And I remember there was a guy, Rich, that was the sales manager at the time, real nice guy, and I went in and interviewed with him, and I was super young. I mean, I was way skinnier than what I am now. I went in there. I knew how to sell electronics, but the biggest ticket I ever sold was, I don't know, maybe $2,000 laptop, right? It wasn't big home improvement tickets.
It wasn't a $20,000 siding job.
Right. So Rich had asked me about background in sales, and I told him, I was like, look, I was really good at what I was doing. I was selling electronics, whatever. And then he basically just questioned me on, well, what makes you think you can sell home improvements? And I was like, well, I really don't know. I was like, I'm good at sales. Everything I've tried to sell so far, computers. When I worked at Best Buy, they put me in different departments: TVs, appliances, car audio, and I could sell all that stuff. It was the same process.
Yeah.
And then when I went to Radio Shack, I was top rep at Radio Shack selling cell phones. I was like, I remember I told him in my interview, being a little cocky, as a lot of sales reps are, I was like, Rich, I tell you what, if I'm not number one within the first 90 days, I will quit because...
Nice, and they're also insatiable gamblers too, right?
Yeah, right. So he was like, all right, well, I want to set you up for a second interview. Okay. I was like, okay, great. So I went home and I told my wife, I was like, hon, you really can make that much money. And I mean, they promised me I'm going to make $100,000 if I'm good, and I know I'm going to be good, and I will just figure it out. And it's going to change your lives. And so she actually put together a pitch book. So I had gotten awards from the different companies I worked for, Best Buy for Salesman of the Month. I've gotten awards for CompUSA, Radio Shack. Radio Shack used to give so many awards out. I'd literally just start putting them in a folder. Like it wasn't, it was like paper certificates.
Nice.
So she had taken them all and basically created me a pitch book. Okay. And I remember I came home from
the Steve Book of Honor.
Yeah. So I remember I came home one day and she was like, hey, look, check this out. And I had all the first place for this and first place for that, and Salesman of the Month, Salesman of the Month, and blah, blah, blah.
And what did he do?
So I remember I met, this was with Tom, he's one of the owners of New Look Home Design, and I sat down with him. Patrick, which is in charge of all the sales of it. Tom does more of the production.
Both Tom and Patrick are going to be parts 2 and 3 of this series, by the way. Note to self.
Yeah, so Patrick would have been the one to do my interview because he does all like the sales and marketing side of New Look, and he was on vacation the week that I was interviewing. So Tom did the interview, and Tom was just real laid back. He's like, okay, well, just tell me about yourself, whatever. I was like, look, I'll come in. I know how to do sales. I was like, just show me your product. I was like, and I'll be number one. And I was like, look, here's my proof. And I just started flipping through the book.
Got it.
And had my pitch book. And they later told me, I mean, that pretty much sealed the deal. Like, okay.
Nice. No one's probably ever done that to date.
Right. We're going to give this guy a shot. And so I came in, and I remember I was only allowed to sell windows, so they were exterior modeling company. And I was, so it was like windows, siding, and roofing was just a subset. They only did them like when they added it on to another job where a customer wanted siding.
So it was like, hey, you need windows, and by the way, your roof looks like it's going to fall in and kill someone.
Correct. So, so the only thing I was allowed to sell starting out was windows. And I remember they had their top sales reps. I remember there's this guy, Dave. I'll never forget Dave. And he was the top guy, and I later said he was just a smart kid in a dumb class. Like there wasn't really good sales reps there. So he was like put on this pedestal, and I seen the way that he sold. I did ride-alongs with him, and I seen what he was doing. And I'm like, he has no process. He has no Sa's and do's. He's just shooting from the hip, and he's just closing deals because he's the only one running the good leads. So he's not closing the leads that
so
he
he's
should
fat
be
and overfed versus hungry.
Yeah. So and I remember I had to prove myself, so they wouldn't give me all the cherry pick leads. I remember I was getting the 4 window basement leads, right, and I have to upsell them to get the rest of the house in there. And I still remember this one lead Rich sent me on, and I was out there, and he was texting me, like, hey man, you almost done that lead. I was like, no, I'm writing up a sale now. And he didn't respond back to me, but later he says he could not believe I sold that deal because he sent me out just to get me out on the lead. He had he didn't think it was going. It was for 4 windows in a basement. I ended up selling him the whole house, the house full of windows. So I right out the gate, actually, I started, it was in July, I forget, I think it was like 2017 or 28, sorry, 2007, no, it was 2009, July of 2009, I think is when I started New Look. It might have been, it was July 2009. And it was I think it was the 17th of July to be exact. And that first month, I remember I sold $40,000, and it was good enough for 3rd place at the time. Wow. Yeah, so it was good enough for 3rd place.
Well, you had to make Dave sweat?
Well, no, Dave. I remember there was this guy, Dennis, and this guy, Dave, and they were like the top 2 guys. And so I was like, all right, I'm just getting my bearings. I was there for 2 weeks. I sold $40,000. I remember it was like a $16,000 deal, and I had like 2 or 3 other small deals.
Okay.
So then the second month came, and again, I was only selling windows. They wouldn't allow me to sell other stuff because they went to Dave and Dennis. Right?
Got it.
So I would go run these leads and come back, and then I put up some numbers. I think my second month I did $80,000. And
so then people started to look.
Yeah, so I remember Dennis had 60 on the last day of the month, and I had 80, and we each got a lead or whatever. And then Dennis somehow, I don't know, I think it was a B-back deal, right, where he didn't sell the first time, whatever he was working at. And he got it back, and he sold it, and then he ended up beating me by like 10K, so like a $30,000 deal at the end of the month.
Got it.
And I remember I went up to him at the monthly meeting for that month. I was like, hey man, I almost got you. And he said, this was kind of like what lit a fire under me. He's like, I'll never let a junior rep beat me. And I was like, okay.
Oh, so at that point, he pokes the bear.
Yeah. So I was like, okay. So then I started making money. And I remember it was funny because New Look had a draw. So to get new reps to come in, right, in home improvement sales, it takes a little bit to get your commissions going, right? Because you got to wait for the installs and stuff to come in. So they would give me a draw. I think it was like $500. It might have been $300, somewhere around in there.
Got it.
Where they would let you. It was basically just like a salary while you're building your books up, and they will let you take that up to I think 3 months. Yeah, so I was used to living off of nothing, just living paycheck to paycheck. I was like, so 3 more months of just living paycheck to paycheck is nothing if I'm getting free money. So I was like, I'll just not take money off of my books. I'll let that kitty build and build and build, and I'll just keep taking the $300 or $500, whatever it was, every single week. I remember it got to a point where Patrick came to me. He's like, hey man, you have way too much money on your books. I'm not giving you this $300, $400 more. You got to start drawing your commissions off of that. That's for people who are just trying to build their books up. I had like $40,000 sitting in due commissions, and I wasn't taking any of it. I was just taking the $500.
Okay.
Yeah. So the third month is when kind of things broke loose. And
so that's that tipping point.
Yeah, that was the tipping point. That's really where my life, my family's life kind of changed. And that I started selling, right out of the gate I was selling, but now they was like, okay, I proved myself. I had basically 6 or 8 weeks in, whatever it was. And then I was like, I remember telling Pat, hey man, just put me on a siding. Show me the demo once. I know the process. I'll figure it out. And he did. He did a quick 1 hour pitch or whatever, show me how to sell siding, and I went out there, and now I was able to start competing with the other guys.
Got it, on the big tickets.
Yeah, on the big tickets, because it was $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 tickets.
Got it. So at that point too, and again, you had gone through all the ropes, tested yourself the first 2 months, and they had really just started putting up some numbers with this. So fast forward, now you're a contender.
Yep.
So how many, I would say, how long did it take for you to get to that number 1 spot?
The 3rd month, I got it.
Boom. Dave, suck it.
Yeah.
Right?
So I beat him that month, and he might have beat me 1 or 2 months after that, but I was pretty much just consistent. I remember when I first started there, hitting $100,000 in a month at the time. And you got to remember, this is when the economy had just tanked, right? So getting financing, the lenders. Yeah, we had one finance option we could offer the customer, which is a 15.99 interest rate for I don't know, maybe 120 months. Yeah, so.
Or you could take Vinny for 27% in a baseball bat if you don't pay it back.
Right. So this was a time when it was hard to sell. I mean, the economy sucked then, right? So $100,000, hitting $100,000 in a month was a milestone, right? Matter of fact, when I first started working there, I think it only ever been hit like 3 or 4 times ever. And keep in mind too, for people who don't know this, New Look Home Design is not a little rinky-dink mom and pop owner operator. They have 3 offices, somewhere in the ballpark of like 50 reps at any given time over 3 states. Yep. It's a legit business, and they do a lot. I think roughly right now, I forget where they're at on the QR Top 100. Yeah, last it was
46.
They're up there.
I think they're like 46. It's pretty legit. So when Steve came in and did this, it was no small feat. So within the home improvement space, obviously you now got your feet underneath you. You hit number 1 at month 3, and then truthfully, guys, throughout his tenure there, how many total years were you at New Look?
7.5.
So it's 7.5 years. How many months were you not number 1, not including those first 2?
I averaged it through my whole time there every other month. I got it. So half of the months I was there, I was salesman of the month.
Got it. So he's a slouch. But with this, you guys, now this is where we're going to start getting into a little bit more of the hey, where the hell did Leap come from? During that process, while you were doing this, not only are you hitting number 1 rep, not only are you doing this during a really crappy part, excuse my French, I almost said something bad, but like a really crappy part during the economy. Interest rates are terrible, financing options are difficult to accrue, people didn't have a lot of liquid assets, plus, even if they're going to use like a HELOC or something like that to leverage equity, guess what? There really wasn't that much equity because a lot of homes just got hammered. So when looking at a lot of this stuff, obviously you had a lot of things going against you. On top of that too, New Look used 100% paper processes for everything. When you walked into a home, were you carrying like just a small library's worth of materials?
Yeah. So this is really how this is the birth of Leap. So the very first iteration was an Excel spreadsheet. So when I started working there, I remember I did my training. It was, I don't know, a week long or something like that. And then we had different trainings, like because you had it for Windows, and then it was all the paperwork and stuff that went with Windows. And then after I got those under my belt, after a month or two, then I got trained on siding, and then eventually they started doing more roofing, gutters, blah blah blah.
Got it. So if someone's like, "Hey, I like that window," but maybe I'll go with the other one. Crumple. Damn it. So it out again.
Yeah. So we had a paper pitch book. So we had this little pitch book, company story, had like the Better Business Bureau stuff in it, like a pin map of all the different jobs we did in the area, and just company story, before and after pictures, whatever. So I had that.
Quest instructions.
I was using GPS.
I'm joking.
So we had that book, and then I had another book, which I was like about a 1-inch 3-ring binder, and I had all the different forms that I needed. So I had like a window contract, a siding contract, a roofing contract, a gutter contract, a contract if they were financing, a contract if they're paying cash.
Jeez. So when you finished a deal, how many papers are you talking about in that stack, roughly, if you had to approximate?
Well, if you were selling one product, you had the product page, and then you had a payment page, which had all the finance information on it, which was the carbon copy, like a 3-part carbon copy.
So you're literally talking a stack of papers, probably 10 deep.
Yep. Then you had a measure sheet for each product that you sometimes would turn in, sometimes not.
Okay. Right? And then I know New Look does little like, hey, we come into your home, let's take a little initial survey.
Right. You had a survey sheet with a bunch of questions on
paper.
it. Yeah. So, and then I had another book. So I had 3 books total, not counting all my brochures, because I had all these brochures in my briefcase. I remember I had a briefcase. I mean, it was 1.5 feet wide. I remember I busted the bottom out of one of them because of just lugging it around for 2-3 years.
Nice. Strong back.
Right. So I had I had a price book, and it had all the different dividers for roofing, and then I'd flip it, and you'd have all different things for windows, all different styles and sizes, and you'd have to go through. And I remember when you're doing these sales, we were a one-call close company, so I had to sell the deal right then and there. And they were also a canvassing company. They were around knocking on doors, and a lot of times they would go around knocking on doors, and we call them same-day appointments. So they would knock on the door at 4 o'clock in the evening, and I was in that house at 6 o'clock pitching a windows and signing up a contract an hour and a half, 2 hours later for $20,000, and the customer had no intentions on buying buying windows, period, let alone spending $20,000. All in a matter of 4 hours.
Got it. So you not only have to get all their personal information, which then had to be put back in the systems. It was just a paper cluster, if
Correct.
you will.
So the sales, like going back to like when I worked at Best Buy and I worked in retail and just trying to figure out a process, like I was trained a good sales process at New Look to follow, and I followed it every single time. But I would also get tidbits from other reps where, hey, I tried this and the house and this worked, and we would have like meetings, and over the course of time I was just picking all the things I liked from different people and put that in my process. So even though I followed the same process every time, it evolved over time.
Got it.
So what I did is had taken, after about literally the first, say, 6 months, I don't know the exact date, but it was within the first year, I took my price book and put in an Excel spreadsheet. So I'd taken all the line items, and I just put in an Excel spreadsheet so I could just go in and had little drop downs, and instead of doing the math, because I'm trying to close you in one call, I would have to say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, give me a second to work that up, and I would pull
what
out. What
happens in that? I mean, obviously that dead air or that dead
right.
moment.
So then Mr. and Mrs. Jones, like one of the things that they would always do is ask if Mr. and Mrs. Jones was sitting at home, so that when I was pitching the lead, they couldn't say, oh, well, I got to ask my wife or I got to ask my husband.
Yeah.
So I knew that if I had both Mr. and Mrs. Jones sitting at the kitchen table, the likelihood of me closing the deal that day was much higher. I wouldn't say very high. It was much higher than if one of the parties,
like a one-legger or something like that.
Well, even if one was like upstairs, right? So there were a lot of times I found where I'm working up an estimate where I go around, I gather all my measurements, right? Mrs. Jones is following me around the house, showing me all the windows or the siding or whatever it is. And then I was like, okay, well, give me a second to work up the numbers. And I was going in my paper price book, flipping all the different pages, and then I'm adding them up. And then even if it took 5 minutes, that was 5 minutes that Mr. and Mrs. Jones can leave the kitchen table, right? And then I know as soon as that happens, my chances of closing the deal diminish, right? I don't mean every single time.
I got to go cook dinner. Right. I got to go put the kids to bed.
Right, exactly.
Got it.
So to be more efficient in the home, I had taken my price guide and put it in an Excel spreadsheet.
Okay.
And I was using that day in and day out. I got pretty good at Excel, and this was going back to my computer information technology days in high school, where that is one of the things that I learned was Excel. So I knew how to create formulas and make things like dynamic, like if this, then that, etc.
Yeah.
So I had my windows in there, and then I put my roofing, then I put my siding. And I used that for a while. And then I eventually layered in the financing, so we started to get more plans, right? So the economy started to get a little bit better. We signed up with a different lender, and I didn't have, before we had one payment multiplier, that was it. We were selling that financing, or the customer had to pay cash, no ifs, ands, or buts.
Yeah, get your credit card ready, get some miles.
So then we started to get some cool plans, like a deferred interest or deferred payments,
Got it.
right? Like a 12-month no-no or something like that. So those had different fees associated with them and different payment multipliers. So I'd layered those in my spreadsheet.
Got it. So it did all the math for you. You could speed up the process quite a bit.
And then, of course, it calculated my commission. That was a big one.
Nice.
So I could literally, in the house, I would flip open my laptop, and I would put in all my measurements, and then I would type in which financing plan, or click which financing plan that I wanted, and then it would give me a number that I should sell it at, like my starting price, my discount price, and then it gave me like a floor minimum price that I wasn't allowed to sell below. And then at the top, I could key in which financing option I'm actually selling and how much I'm selling it for, and then it would spit out exactly to the penny how much my commission was.
Got it. And keep in mind, you're going into the home with a big clunky old laptop doing this.
Windows
right?
laptop, And but it worked, right? I mean, I used this thing forever, and that's really all it did. And this literally was the birth of Leap. If it wasn't for this spreadsheet, Leap probably wouldn't be in existence. And I still have this spreadsheet. It's funny, we should probably post it online or something at some point, screenshot of it. I still have it on my old laptop. So
we'll do that for you guys.
Yeah. So what had happened was as I was running leads, right, I was top rep at that company, so now other sales reps were doing ride-alongs with me. And at first I hated it, right, because it was a distraction for me.
Yeah.
And I was always afraid of, like, well, did I say this? Did I not do that? And they train them one way, and
don't screw it up. Go walk their dog while I close this deal.
Yeah, so, and I just didn't want it to be a distraction both for the homeowner and for me. I didn't want to be out of my element. But after so many times, you just get used to it, right? So it got to, at the end, I mean, it was every single time I ran a lead, there was somebody riding along with me.
Got it.
So I was using this spreadsheet in the house, and what happened was New Look, the other reps were riding along with me, and New Look didn't want anybody using the spreadsheet because they didn't control it. Yeah. Right?
It's not the process, it's Steve's process.
Correct. So around this time, so this is getting into how this spreadsheet evolved into the app today. So around this time, so I've been working New Look for, say, at this point, I'm using the spreadsheet, it's probably about 2.5 years in, and I bought an iPad 2. My wife's sister had bought the very first iPad that came out.
Got it.
I remember I had like I think a Palm Pre at the time, which is a little clamshell phone that's lit up with the keyboard. Yeah, so I had one of those, and the iPad 2 came out. It was the first one with the FaceTime camera on it.
Oh yeah, and you're a techno geek. So this whole time, this love for technology that even stemmed all the way back to like Best Buy, high school, Radio Shack, CompUSA, all that stuff. That never died. So you've always had like, you know, even the fart machine, if you will.
Yeah, correct. I love technology. I had a fart machine with a remote control.
Right? Yeah. That was high tech back in the day. That was our days in high school. So going back, obviously you've always been this technophile. You love this stuff. It's been a huge part of who you are. It's been a huge part of like your passion, what drives you. You take whatever you've built in this spreadsheet and see the potential once you start glancing at an iPad.
Yeah, so my iPad, I'm like, so I see my wife's, and then the second one came out, and I remember I watched the keynote or whatever for it, and I was like, oh man, that thing looks awesome.
Yeah.
Right, it's high tech. I wanted an excuse to get a new gadget.
And ding!
Yeah. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to use this thing for work. And actually, I was on, I think, my second or third laptop, because, you know, I remember I had an HP, and then the screen went out. I got another HP, and then I think the motherboard or hard drive went out.
Yep.
So I think I was on my second or third, or I was on my second laptop, but it had been sent back and repaired once, right?
Okay, got it.
So I bought the iPad, and I was like, okay, this is what I want to use in the house. So I got the iPad, brought it back, and
it just looks cool.
Yeah. So I go to put my spreadsheet on the iPad, but Microsoft Office didn't exist back then.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, oh man, so how can I, build this sheet? Like, what can I do? There's got to be a way. So I tried this also is when all the apps are the craze. Right? There's a new app for everything. So the first thing I did is actually went on. I was like, well, there's other people that do what I do. So somebody had to have thought of an app. I remember one of the things I was like, man, I wish I had a way to keep track of my gas because I'm running all these leads. I wish I could just type in my odometer, put how many gallons of gas out, and it would tell me how much I'm spending on gas, whatever. I go in the App Store, boom, there's an app to do that. So I was like, so it's like there's got to be an app for home improvement sales. There's an app for everything else. Mm-hmm. So I go in the App Store and I found some. I remember there was one I think called Quick Sale, which was just reminded me like a cash register, and you would just they had all these different SKUs, and you would bring the thing in, but it didn't work for home improvements. It just didn't do what I needed to do, and
it's such a different process. Like when selling in the home, it's so unique compared to other industries. There's so many variables, there's so many different components. Every single company sells something different. Every single company sells something in a different way.
Correct.
And there's no two interactions that are going to be the same. So obviously, when trying to find this, there wasn't that cohesive.
Nope, I couldn't find an app, and so I.
At that point, did you start salivating?
Well, no, I didn't know anything about computer programming. Okay. I took this class in high school that showed how to make web pages, but that was at the end of the school year, and then I was just checked out. I was like, this class is boring. As a matter of fact, I remember I failed the class as far as grades go, but I got 100% on the final exam. So I actually passed the class because of that.
Nice.
I got an E in the class, but I passed the final exam. So I don't know what my grades ended up being, but I passed. So anyway, I had zero computer programming experience. I had no intention. Matter of fact, I tried to learn numbers, which is Apple's version of Excel. So I tried to learn numbers and replicate the functionality of my spreadsheet in the iPad, and it just wasn't cutting it.
Yeah.
And then around this time too, New Look had actually changed roofing manufacturers. So they went from I think Certainty to Owens Corning. And it broke my spreadsheet because when I built it all around the products that they were selling, and then they switched manufacturers. To go back and update it was a lot of work, and now I was in kind of this limbo. So I was like, well, apps were all the craze, right? And you've seen all these apps taking off and people making all this money on apps, and I'm like, well, I got a brain. I can, let's see if I can make one. Let's just see what it's like. How it can't be that hard if if other people are doing it, I can figure it out.
Carrot dangled, challenge accepted.
So I was like, let's see what it is. And then plus I had this iPad that was $1,000 Angry Birds. Right, that's the only real thing that I could do on the thing. Check my email and play
toilet games.
Yeah, so I on the iPad, and this is another thing that kind of made me do it, was the iBooks where you can read books on it. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, let's go in here and see if there's a book on how to build apps. And of course, I did some Google searching and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I went on the Apple Bookstore and I just typed in after doing some Google searching.
Coding for Dummies, right?
Well, it's funny because the very first book I had bought on the Apple Store was C++ for Dummies.
Okay, which if you guys don't know, C++ is a lot of the dev languages used for software development.
Yeah. So I bought that, and I understood. When I worked at Radio Shack, I worked with this one guy that that's what he was going to school for, was computer science. Yeah. So
you guys would nerd out.
Yeah, and I would talk to him I understood the concept of computer programming, how it worked and the if and else statements and stuff like that. Yep. But I just didn't understand the language and the ins and outs of it.
Got it. So you got your book. Started down that coding road.
So I bought a book and just started tinkering with building an app. And I remember that book taught you, part one of that book taught you just the fundamentals of programming apps for an iOS device, so for an iPhone or an iPad. And so I just went through, and literally every chapter was, the first chapter was, how to, print your name into the little console, and the next one is how to change the name of the print to the console, right? And it was just real basic, and chapter by chapter. And then they had a follow-up to the book, and this was actually in the winter time, because in home improvements it's very seasonal. Mm-hmm. So in the winter time,
at least in the Northeast, I'm from Southern California, and it's badass year-round.
Yeah. So where we were at, I remember there were times where I didn't run a lead for a week straight.
Got it.
So
you had some time to kill.
Yeah, time to kill. And plus, my wife was still working at the time. She was working in a doctor's office. Kids were at school. I was like, I have time to kill. So I would just killing time with this computer programming. And by the time I got through the second book, which wasn't long, I remember throughout the second book, that's when you got into actually learning how to use the buttons and the toggles and the text fields. And
so
you're
at this point, you're
things
systematically building Leap.
And so here's the thing is, when I started that programming, it was never really, I know, like, thinking back, it's like, well, I must have done that with the intention to replace the functionality of my spreadsheet. But that was kind of all, I think, a coincidence that, hey, I couldn't get my spreadsheet on the iPad, and I just took up computer programming, because when I got done the second book, you actually end up building a body mass index calculator. So as you go through each chapter, once you get done the book, you have an app that you built from scratch that you could type in your height and your weight, and it will give you your body mass index.
At this point, were you still skinny or fat?
I was still skinny.
Awesome.
I was still skinny.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Just checking.
Yeah. So at the end of the book, it says, okay, now go out and make something that you would use as something, as a challenge. Why don't you take the body mass index calculator app and modify it so that you can put in a target height and a target weight, and it will, and your height, and it will give you a what your body mass index would be. It's something along those lines that you had to basically, like, reverse engineer the way that you built it. Okay. So I was like, okay, I'll take that challenge, and then I did it. So.
And it worked?
Yeah, it worked.
Cool.
It was fairly simple. So, yep. So then I was like, okay, well, I've done this book, and I looked at different other books, and I was like, okay, well, I know the fundamentals. Let me think of something. And of course, now I'm like, I was addicted to it. It was very addicting, because I was like, okay, well, this is so cool. I can make this device.
It's like a new way to flex your brain.
Yeah, I can make this device do anything that I want. So I was trying to think of an app that I could build, and it's funny. My wife was just talking about this, where she was complaining about I was spending so much time. Like, I was staying up to 3, 4 o'clock in the morning sometimes, just coding, getting things to work and trying to figure out problems, because I'd get down a rabbit hole with something where, like, I gotta get this thing working. What is it? It's just something else I gotta learn, or what is it? And if I was to lay down to go to sleep, my brain wouldn't allow me to go to sleep until I figured that thing out.
Captain ADHD, both of us.
Yeah, so it was funny. A funny story was I remember one time I was complaining about, all you do is you spend your time on the thing, you never show any affection, blah, blah, just typical things that women will do. So I was like, all right, I know what I'll do. And then next time that I was programming, I wrote a quick app that sends a push notification on a timer every 60 seconds. So I would install it on her phone, and every 60 seconds I'll say, like, I love you, or I'm thinking of you, or something like that.
Every 60 seconds?
Every 60 seconds. And she couldn't turn it off without deleting the app. So it was
nice.
fun.
That's how nerds show affection.
Yeah, we were just talking about that. Hi, Jewel. I know you're probably watching this.
Yeah. Hi. Don't get mad at me. I know. But yeah, so again, you guys, going back to where we're headed with this, obviously you got challenged by this, learning this new technique and new skill set. Honestly, just opened doors. So what was that push after Jules accused you of cheating on her with code, and then your amazingly nerdy rebuttal? Like, from there, how did we get to that point where you're like, all right, fire lit under my ass, light bulb came on, I should just build that app that didn't exist? So
it got to the point where I was like, I'd learned enough to build an app. Like, you're never done learning in computer programming. So I'd learned enough to know how to build an app from scratch. So I was like, okay, well, let me think of something that I use. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to replace the functionality of my spreadsheet in this iPad. And this all transpired in probably about, like, from the time that I got the first book to the time that I started writing Leap, all within probably 6 to 8 months.
Okay, so pretty quick.
Yep. So, and remember, my spreadsheet, all it did was, it was a glorified calculator. It just had a list of a bunch of items, and it added. I'm
sure everybody on this is familiar with just
a lot of people
spreadsheet hell.
So it's funny, because, like, I thought my spreadsheet was advanced, and in going through this with Leap and onboarding customers, they show us their spreadsheets. Pretty incredible to see what some of the stuff. And there's some stuff that I'm like, how the hell did you guys even get that to work? Like, I've seen spreadsheets hooked up to APIs, and they're communicating with CRMs, and I'm like,
I come from the private equity world too, folks. So when you want to talk about really complicated spreadsheets that can pull databases offline, etc.
So these, I've seen some crazy ones.
Yeah.
So I had started programming an app to replace the functionality of my iPad. And really, I remember what I did is I literally just replicated the spreadsheet. So on the spreadsheet, I have different fields that I could type in my measurements, and it would do the math. So I put that exact same thing in the iPad, and I had the fields I could type in my measurements, and it would give me the totals. And I had little tabs. I had one for each product, so roofing, siding, gutters, trim, doors, whatever it was, and I would type in my measurements and it would give me a price. And I remember I was taking it in and I would show the other sales reps what I was working on. And at this point, I couldn't even use it in the house because the spreadsheet I was using had way more functionality than what this one did.
Yeah.
But I showed them what I was working on, and I would get like some people like poking fun of, oh, your nerdy app or whatever. And part of it was like, because I was top sales rep at the time, right? So
right. This guy thinks he can just pull this out of his butt and be okay.
So I started tinkering with this, and I remember I was going back to Pat and Tom. I'm like, hey guys, look, I'm working on this app. What do you think? And
what was their response to that? Obviously, this is before any formal system existed. You looked online, there was no other app that did this. Obviously, there's been a lot of other tools that claim they can do this, but no one used it. So at the time, what was their response?
Yeah,
was it like, get out of here, you nerd?
No, I'm still friends with them, but I had built up a relationship with them, working with them. I was their top sales rep. They took the conversation, but it was basically
they're like, yeah, please just go sell things.
Pretty much, yeah. So it was like, oh, that's neat, like there wasn't like a.
We'll hear their account of this, by the way.
Yeah. It wasn't, at least, so I'm curious to see what they say. But it wasn't like it completely shut me down. It was, hey, that's neat, use it, you can make it better for yourself, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, well, that's what I'm going to do. And then that's what I did. And literally, I'm running leads. And then eventually, I got it to a point after about a year in from the time I bought the first book to, to this.
And this is probably how deep into your tenure at? This is probably what, like 2010, 2011?
Yep. I remember it was like iOS 5. So that's how I remember, because I started coding in iOS 5.
Got it.
So we're on 13 right now. So however long, 8 years ago. So you do the math, right? Yep. So it was like 7 or 8 years ago, say.
So for a lot of you guys too, this is one of those things that we also, I know we've been in this for around 50 minutes already, but one of the things that you really need to think about with this is, while Leap has only been a formal company for about 3 years, it's actually 3 years this November. Happy anniversary.
Right. Well, that's the 3 years that we signed up the first customer. So yeah.
Sweet. So we're coming up on 3 years, but keep in mind, right now, we're talking like almost 9 years.
Correct.
That this thing has been in an iterative process.
And testing. So at this point, so this is what, 2009?
Yeah.
2010?
2010.
Yep. So I'd gotten it to a point where now my laptop I was no longer using in the house. I was using just my iPad. And I remember I was showing other sales reps and they're like, oh, well, it was an ugly app. It was a disaster.
Yeah.
But it worked. It was functional. And there were bugs like crazy in the application. So only I knew how to use it. I knew all the workarounds in it. And I was the only one using it. And I was just happy with that. I was like, hey, I got a cool app. If I needed it to do something, I would add to it. And then I ran with that for a good, 2 years.
And real quick too, one of the other things, and a lot of use in tech, especially when dealing with people, is their reaction. So when you switched from using the laptop in the home to starting to use this, did you notice any difference in their behavior?
That's tough to say. I'm sure that there was. I just really didn't pick up on it.
Got it.
At that time, because again,
you're making money,
right? That was my sole focus, was to sell that deal and to be as efficient as possible doing it, so I can run another one. Right? I wasn't thinking about what it was on the customer's end or any of that. It was, matter of fact, on the customer's end, the only thing that it just sped up the sales process, like me being in their house.
So
instead of being in there 2.5 hours, I was there for an hour and a half, because I didn't have to do all the math. And heaven forbid the customer wants to mix and match all the different options, right? Because they don't have to redo the math.
Yeah.
So
crinkle that piece of paper, redo it, and
yeah. So from the customer's point of view on that, looking back, it probably wasn't that. I mean, they're like, hey, he's calculating on his tablet, but that was, I don't know if it was that big of an impact. Maybe.
We've got studies on this stuff. We'll show you more.
So I had, so then after, me personally, I was making it better for myself. So I would go out, and I remember we had to update lead results. So the company that I was working for was using a cloud-based CRM. They're using one of our good partners today, MarketShart. To this day, they still use them. So
I love you guys.
Yep, I had the app working for me, and I remember when they were using MarketSharp, we had to go in and log in and update all of our notes. So when they started using MarketSharp, we had to go in and type in like the last price offered, what products did you pitch, what was the objection reason, what's the best time to follow up, like all these notes. And I had to type the same thing in over and over and over again. So I went back, and again, New Look had just started using MarketSharp, so I went back and made my app so that all of those details I could easily type into my iPad, or it was already in there based off the measurements, and I could click a button and it would basically use the copy command, like when you copy off the clipboard, and it would copy a note to my clipboard on the iPad. So then I would open up Safari and I would log into MarketSharp, go to my lead and click in the text and just hit paste.
Got it.
And paste the note in, so I didn't have to type all that thing in.
Got it. So you're basically creating shortcuts for everything.
Correct. So that made me more efficient on doing that. So eventually, I had contacted MarketSharp using New Look, right? Because New Look was one of their top customers, and I had said, "Hey, can I work on?" Do you have a way that I can just push all this data in automatically, right? Because the copy paste became redundant. It was a lot better than typing it in, but I wanted to just click a button and it go in. And so they're like, hey, well, we're working on our own estimator. We have a couple API endpoints. You can tie into those because we're doing the same thing.
APIs for you guys is just basically a way to pipe data from one piece of software to another.
Right. So and this was actually, I think, my first API that I'd worked with. I'm pretty sure it was the first one I worked with. So they had sent me the API information, and I got that working. I was able to push my lead in there.
Got it.
So then, running these leads, other sales reps are running with me. Word kind of got out around the office that I was using this, and then the management at New Look kind of like stopped ignoring it. They're like, okay, well, what is this thing about?
Yeah, we need to pay more attention.
Yeah, let's pay a little bit of attention
to it.
And then, I had it connected to MarketSharp, and they're like, well, how's that pushing in? And my notes were always perfect, right? Because they were always the same thing every time. I was never missing any information. I always did it, right? Because it was click of a button. All the other sales reps were just too lazy.
And I know we're going to talk to Tom, but Tom obviously has a lot to do on the production side of the world at New Look. They never had any issues with you and errors or anything like that, did they?
I'm sure I had errors, but what happened was when I would have errors, and especially ones that cost me money, I would go back and say, well, I'm never going to make that error again, and I will put things in my software. Correct. I put the things in the app to prevent me from making that mistake again. Make sure I dotted the I's and crossed the T's.
The little note to self, and then fix it when you got home.
Yeah. So New Look was like, okay, they seen this estimator, and I had a couple iterations. So I remember I threw all the code away at one point, started over because it got to the point where when I first started and as I was learning, it was more work to fix that up than it was to just start from scratch.
Got it.
So I had iterated it 2 or 3 times, and then I remember New Look came to me and said, okay, well, since you have stuff pushing into MarketSharp, we have this whole production process, which we have 30 to 40 sales reps. So to get them to adopt a piece of software that's kind of homegrown that I built in my bedroom, is a lot higher risk. We have two or three, I think, production managers that do all these manual processes. And if you can make an app for them, we will use that one. And I was like, okay, well, show me what that process is. And they're like, okay, well, we have the sales rep goes out and he sells the windows, right? So deal comes in, sales rep turns in his carbon copy contract. We have an office manager that scans that contracts and uploads it into MarketSharp. And then we have a production manager that then we have a different rep, I don't know what they would call him, that would go in and create kind of a job packet in a folder that they would give to a site inspector. Right, a guy that goes out, and then that guy would have the copy of the contract, and then like a measure sheet or whatever, and he would go out and measure all the windows, remeasure to get an exact measurement to order the windows, and then he would take pictures of all the windows.
So validate and document.
Yep, and then he was like, they were still using fax, so they were faxing in the measure sheets. Yeah, they were faxing in the measure sheets and emailing in the photos. Then somebody at the office would get the fax, scan them in. Right, because the person out in the field wasn't tech savvy enough to be able to email their handwritten document in. So they would fax them in. Then somebody would scan the fax and gather all the pictures from the email and upload them into, it was kind of like a Dropbox, it was called Ignite. Yeah. And they would upload them into that. And they're like, if you can build an app to take care of all this, right, we'll use that. And I remember I said, okay, I'll do that. and it was a new project for me because this time I pretty much had my app like working. It was done for me.
Yeah.
That was it. It wasn't.
It's on autopilot.
Yeah, it was on autopilot. So I was like, all right, cool. It's a new project to work on, another thing to kill some time. My wife is going to love it. So I came back and I started working on this, and so I'd said to them, I was like, look, I'll work on this and get it going, and yeah, I can take care of that process in an app, but if I get it to do it, then I want you to take my estimator apps more seriously and make it to where other sales reps will use it.
Got it.
And they were
Your
like,
if-then statement.
correct. So they were probably like, okay, and again, I'm curious to see what they say on this. So like, okay, go ahead and do it. So I forget how long it took me, and of course there's a couple iterations, but I built an app, and at the time my estimator that I was using, there was another sales rep that came in. He seen what I'm doing, and he had a computer programming interest as well. And he would like, how does this work, and how do you do that? And he took a really a liking to the app and what I was doing in it. He didn't like give me the poke fun of it. Yeah. So he actually gave me the name. He came in one day. He's like, hey Steve, I have a great name for your app. I was like, what is it? I forget what I called it at the time. And he's like, why don't you call it Estimate? And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, like an estimate, because that's what you're creating in it, because that's all it did at the time, but it's like a mate, like your companion. I was like, oh, I like that name, and that's what we called it, Estimate. We called it that for the longest time. And well, when I used it, that's what we called it. So when I started working on this production app, I started calling it MeasureMate, right? Because just the two names played together. Yeah. So you went out and did the measurements. So I had all the documents that New Look had used for those reps, the measure sheets and order forms and pictures. And I basically just built a process where they could click into this form and they could fill out all their measurements and hit done, and click in the next form, done. And they hit one button and it uploaded it all into Ignite. So fax machine went away, the emails went away, all that stuff went away. And there was, again, a couple iterations of the app, and then I took it in the New Look. And it's funny, they were using the app, and just recently, within the last year, I think it was this year, they finally stopped using it because they kept coming back to me to do updates. And that thing was built for iOS 7. And I was like, I remember I was telling them, look guys, I don't have the time. I'm working in Leap. This project is something I built a long time ago, and it's not being updated anymore. So they had iPads that like they couldn't update. Got it. Yeah, because it wasn't compatible with the new systems. Got it. So, but they used that thing for, again, up until a couple months ago. They used MeasureMate. Now they use Leap to do that process. Yeah, obviously. So we've worked with them very closely to overhaul a lot of this. Okay, so we're there. Obviously, we're running a little long on time, guys. So thank you again for staying. But one of the things I want to just like circle back with, because obviously we're going to go get Pat and Tom's basically story of this whole thing go down. One of the biggest things is obviously now you've figured out how to make this thing functional. You solved a lot of their production stuff. They took you a little bit more seriously. Final thing that we can wrap up pretty quickly, and then obviously we'll take you into the next sections of this series, is they take it seriously. They start rolling out to all their sales reps over those 3 offices. It's covering every single product they sell. It's even tying back into all their core systems. You started to functionally understand how to start integrating different components of the software they use. Great. So now everything's going smooth. How the hell did you branch off from New Look and have this thing become its own freestanding entity? Yep. So after MeasureMate, then we had, at the time it was Estimate, and then at this point I had connected it with lenders. Like Service Finance was the lender that we'd use, so I'd used New Look's contact and reached out to Service Finance and said, hey, can I do an integration, blah, 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 pushing deals through. And then I had it hooked up to, also I had it doing contracts at this time. Now it's not what we have today in contracts. This was a very basic version. Kind of like editable PDFs. It was an editable PDF, yeah. And it was even more basic than that, because if you wanted to modify it, it was a huge challenge to edit anything in it. Got it. So I had so the New Look had adopted it company-wide. So they have about 30 to 40 sales reps. They have 3 offices, and you mentioned earlier 3 states, but they actually cover 6 states in the Mid-Atlantic. It was like Maryland, Virginia, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, D.C. That's their coverage area. Yeah. They're physically located in 3. Correct. So they had reps all across the Mid-Atlantic area that were using the application. And we had a little GroupMe chat. And matter of fact, they even hooked the app up to GroupMe, which today, if you don't know, Leap will post messages in GroupMe once you sell deals. So that was a thing at the company. Every time somebody
Steve just sold something.
Yeah.
They saw that message a lot.
Every time somebody sold something, again, me as a sales rep being efficient, we used to have to call our sales manager so the sales manager could post the message into the group chat that that person sold.
Got it.
And if the sales manager took more than 5 minutes or 10 minutes after the rep sold, he would get a bunch of, hey, well, why didn't you post in my message? They always wanted that little bit of recognition. So we integrated that as well. Anyway, so we created a group me chat, and sales reps were using it throughout all of New Look. And I actually started getting phone calls where reps who worked at New Look used it, and then they went to work at someplace else.
Because we all know the turnover in this space is decent.
So they would go work for somebody else in same type of market, and I would get phone calls. Hey, Steve, this is such and such from such and such company. Jeff worked with you over at New Look, and he said you had this software. And I was like, no, I'm not interested. It only works for New Look. It would take too much to rip it all apart and build it so you can use it. And I just do it as a hobby, and I make too much money selling home improvement, so you couldn't pay me enough to do it anyway. And pretty much turned them away. And then I got another one, and then I got another one. And I remember there's this guy that I used to work with at New Look who went to be a manager at a different company, and I still keep in contact with him today. And he had kept reaching out to me, and he said, hey man, I'm working at this new company. Why don't you just come talk to him? I told him about it. He's all in, blah, 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 blah. And so I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. But Brian, it's not going to happen. I then turned a bunch of them away. And I went and had lunch with, which became our very first customer, American Design and Build. And I told them I would shout them out, Stephanie and Shayna, hello. And I went and met with Shayna and everybody at American Design and Build, and showed them what the app did. And at this time, it was only tailored toward New Look. To get it to be customizable was a lot of work. Yeah. And I could not do it part-time, which is what I was doing in between appointments, right? Managing this app for New Look was enough, right? Yeah. I couldn't do it part-time with another company on it. So I told Brian, I said, look, man, for it to be worth it for me, like I do see value in this application. I seen what it did for New Look. It took them completely.
Those entrepreneurial wheels started spinning.
Like, right. So every day, I'm like, man, this thing, there's to be a lot more. Yeah, I would have to take a couple steps back, but big leaps forward, right? Pun intended. So right. So I was when I went and met with folks at American Design and Build, and I put a number out there that I thought was astronomical. Yeah. And I was like, if they are willing to do it for this amount of money, then there is obviously value here, and I just need to pursue it further. Because if I could just get more of those companies to pay that same amount, well, then I'm good. And then you get enough of a base build up, and then hopefully there's enough money there that now I have a business, and now I can afford to provide for my family.
Yeah, right.
So I went to them and I gave them a big number, and thinking that it wasn't going to work, and then they said, okay, let's do it.
Got it. And hey, I'm going to pause Steve there, because this is where we're going to start getting into, before we go into like the next steps of Leap and where we built this, what was that like, what was it like for those first couple customers to come on, a lot of the major things that we've learned thus far. And before we go into really what's coming down the pipeline for the future of Leap, we're going to also talk to Pat and Tom, because that crucial time where it was being developed within Leap, within New Look, that time was really where Steve not only had a really solid grasp on the actual sales component of this, but it's also fundamentally understanding how these organizations, especially these juggernauts like the New Looks of the world, how they operate. He also got a really good taste of how these other businesses are being run, because so many people had left and either started their own or worked for another, so he was constantly running into these situations with like, hey, let me get that thing, hey, let me get that iPad, come on, man. It's like, junkies basically coming out of the woodwork to try and get his stuff. But anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to pause it here. We're going to talk a little bit more with Pat and Tom. We're going to get a good understanding of what it was like to have this thing come up through the ranks within the organization. They can give their testimonial of how weird Steve was within their organization, all the crazy stuff that he probably brought to their attention, whether or not he taped a fart machine under Pat's desk. Probably not, but we're going to talk a little bit more with those guys about that. And then the next series where we bring Steve back in for our fourth and final is going to be this whole concept of now Leap is a freestanding organization. This is what we learned, and this is what's coming next. Honestly, it's going to be really exciting to talk more about that. Steve,
Great job.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you guys for staying a little bit longer. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat as we do this. I know we've gone well over time, but we'll always be able to respond to you no matter what it is. So if you have a question specifically for Steve, we'll throw this up when we actually put this on YouTube later on. But we'll throw up a little info at leaptodigital.com. Feel free to ping us. We're always happy to answer questions as they come up. So first of probably a series of around 4 on this topic. Again, Steve, thanks so much, boss. Yep. We'll see you guys soon. Cheers.